Hi, it's Penny Black and Jill Foster here for some holiday inspiration. And for today's card, I will be doing some painting, and I am stamping with Penny Black's slapstick cling stamp called Christmas Arrangement. And I just love this stamp. It is great if you love to color the big open leaves and berries and pinecone. Just give you a lot of different options for mediums and color choices. So real quick before I begin, I'm just popping up a list of all the supplies I'm using in creating this card, and I will put this back up at the very end of the video up on screen, so if you want to look at it in more detail at that time, you can just hit pause and check it out. I am starting by stamping this in my Misty Stamp Positioning Tool onto Canson 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. I'm inking my stamp with Acorn Archival ink. This is just a really nice brown color, and by stamping it repeatedly, I'm able to get a great impression on the texture of that watercolor paper and also darken up the color of that ink. Now, I am painting this using my Wendy Vecchi Make Art Blendable Dye Ink re-inkers. So I am just squeezing a little bit of that re-inker ink onto an ink palette, and then I am painting with that. And I'm just doing basic watercolor techniques for painting this in. I love using these re-inkers in particular because I love Wendy Vecchi's colors, but I love painting with re-inkers in general for dye inks or distress inks because you get really bold color and it doesn't seem to fade too much as it dries. And I like bright colors, so that works really well for me. So I'm starting just by putting on a very light green all over these leaves. And the color that I'm using here is some prickly pear, and I'm also going to bring in some fern green. Here it is, that little bit darker color. And then I will blend that out with just water on my brush, sort of going back and forth between the two. The leaves are still wet from that first application of the light green ink, so that does help those two colors blend really well together. And I'm adding the darker color any place like here where one leaf overlaps another, so there'd be kind of a shadow there, and also at the base of the leaf where they are closest to the stems. And you can see there how great those two colors work together. Just with those two, you can get some really wonderful greenery either for Christmas cards, or if you do floral cards, you can also do that. Use them for that. Now I pulled in the Garden Patina, which is a really nice turquoise color, and I'm going to do that up on these leaves. So I wanted some differences between the two sort of styles of leaves, and also to give this just a little more life to it. And so I first put on that Garden Patina turquoise color, and then I'm just adding a touch of the lighter green, that prickly pear, down at the base of the leaf. And again, those two blend and work beautifully together. Now I did do a video with the actual ink pads and ink blending tools for the ink pads that go with these re-inkers, and I'll put a link to that down in the YouTube description box below if you wanted to check out those inks a little bit more and the projects I created with it. But here again, I'm just painting with these, using them like a watercolor. I'm going back and forth here between that Garden Patina color and that prickly pear green. Also using some water up near the tops of those leaves so that they stay pretty light colored. It's just barely showing on screen, but I have a paper towel, dry paper towel, which I use to sort of blot off my paintbrush before I go in for more ink so I don't water it down too much. Now all of that dried, and now I'm picking up a touch of that Garden Patina color, adding it here and there on the tips of these leaves down below, then getting a little water on my paintbrush and blending it out down into the green. And I love that that then ties into those other leaves up at the top. Just very subtle, but again adds a little bit more life to the overall look of the image. So this is going to be a one-layer card, so I really want the painting and the colors to stand out and give dimension to it overall. Now for the pine cone, I'm going to start by applying an orange color. This is Orange Blossom. And then I will add some more shading on that using some of the, I'm just looking at my list here, Acorn re-inker, and putting more of that on the edges. So I'll go back and forth mixing in the orange blossom and the acorn ink. I'm putting the darker color around the outer edge of the pine cone and leaving it lighter in the center. So I'm shading more just to get the round effect of the pine cone rather than all of the little sort of divots in the actual pine cone itself. I added a little bit of sunflower there right in the center of the pine cone just to brighten it up. I love adding just a touch of yellow wherever I can sneak it in. And then just darkening up with that acorn color around the edges. And working all of these colors in while it's still kind of wet, which helps them blend together. It's not super wet, but it is just wet enough that they can blend together. If I get too much of a color, it's getting too dark, I go in with a dry or thirsty brush to sort of pick up the color that's there. And I love making cards like this where I can just stamp one image and then just sit back and take my time to paint it in. If you like to do that, I recommend even just sitting and stamping a whole bunch of different cards. Grab your favorite line art stamp, stamp a whole bunch like this one, and I'm going to have a couple more videos featuring this technique and some other great new stamps from Penny Black. Then you can just have them ready to go whenever you get a chance to sit down and paint, even if it's just a leaf or two here and there. So I am drying that before I move on to my next colors, which are the reds. And reds tend to bleed, so that's why I wanted to make sure that everything was totally dry. And again, like I said, all of the exact colors used will be listed at the very end of the video. And to give some variation and shading to the berries, I'm just going to use a couple different reds here on these. So I'm just picking and choosing a few here and there with one red color. And then I will go in with a different shade of red on the others. So you don't have to do any really intricate shading on those. You can if you want to, but if you just want it to look finished, then you can just do some in different shades, different colors of red. Just toning those ones down just a little bit with a watered down version of that darker red. Here I'll go in and just get these sort of stems of this arrangement real quick. And I did all of my painting on this with a silver black velvet round paintbrush. Again, that's listed in the supply list. Now to finish off this card design, I've just cut a frame using just one of our basic rectangle dies. And I'm just taping this using painter's tape onto that watercolor panel. It's completely dry. And I'm going to use antique linen distress ink applied with an ink blending tool and a foam pad. Just around the edges, primarily where there isn't any stamping or painting. This is a really fun way to finish off a card, especially if you want it to be a one-layer card, but it's just not looking finished enough with your stamped image and painting it in. This usually will do it for me, just to make me feel like it's complete and looks done and designed. After the antique linen was on, I went in with a really light touch and just barely going over the edge of that frame with some gathered twigs distress ink. And I'll go back to blend that out right on top here with some more antique linen and also get this corner down here. And this frame that I'm using as a mask, once I take the tape off and peel it away, I'm just peeking here to make sure I have enough ink, but once I do that, I can reuse that on lots of different cards where I'm using the same layout and design. So I'll just peel that up to reveal that inked background. Now my sentiment is going to come from our transparent set called Christmas Sentiments. And I'm actually just cut one of the sentiments, so I just have this tiny word joy that I'm using. I like the juxtaposition of a big, large stamped image with a tiny little sentiment in the corner, and that inked background gives the perfect place to add it. So I'm stamping this in my stamp positioning tool using Acorn archival ink. And the card is complete, just ready to be mounted to a standard size 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 note card. I thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also connect with Penny Black on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website and blog, and I will link to all of those for you down in the YouTube description box below. And here's the supply list as promised.